Hello students, it's Mrs. Williams again. Today we are going to be solving a quadratic function using the quadratic formula. This is the quadratic formula. Highly recommend memorizing this guy. So x is equal to negative, recommend putting the parentheses there, b plus or minus the square root of all of that stuff. B squared minus 4, recommend the parentheses again, times A times C, and that whole expression is all divided by 2 times A. Okay, so in your files and Teams up at the top, I've put a template just like this so that you can get used to the formula and have it written out in this way so that you can start memorizing it like that. Okay, so know that you can use the quadratic function or the quadratic formula for any quadratic, even if it is factorable. Okay, you can use this. So the first one I'm going to show you how to do is one that could be definitely factored. Actually, these all are factorable, and I'm going to show you in this first video. However, some people just choose to use the quadratic formula for every single quadratic there is. Okay, I don't necessarily agree with that, but it works for everything. So if you ever struggle with factoring, go use the quadratic formula and it will work for you. Okay, one thing to remember is that the quadratic has to be set equal to 0 in order for this to work. Okay, so you can't have like x squared plus 4x minus 3 equals 7. Okay, you would have to subtract that 7 on either side. Okay, so let's say my first quadratic is x squared plus 8x plus 15. Let's say it equals y. Okay, just know if it ever is set equal to y or f of x, then that is the same thing. Well, we want it to be set equal to 0. Okay, so we need to set y equal to 0. And again, when we talk about graphing later in the week or on a different video, okay, you're going to know why we do that. And we do that because these solutions that we're solving for quadratics, they're actually the x-intercepts on the graph. Okay, and we know x-intercepts, the y coordinate of the x-intercept is always 0. And so that's why we set it equal to 0. Okay, so let's say our quadratic is this, x squared plus 8x plus 15. Now, we know it's factorable. We know that we could find factors of 15 that have a sum of 8. Okay, we know it's going to be x plus 3 and x plus 5. We would set each of those equal to 0 and solve. So we'd get negative 3 and negative 5 as our solutions. Okay, but I'm going to show you how this quadratic formula will also work. Okay, first thing, like I've always said, first thing you need to do is identify your A, your B, and your C. Okay, so my A is 1, my B is a positive 8, and my C is a 15. It's imperative here that you put the symbols with it. So if I had minus 15 here instead, it'd be really, really important for you to put a negative 15 for C. All right. So this little template that I have already has this stuff in there. So I'm going to actually highlight the different terms here so it's easy to see. So I'm going to highlight my C green, my B's as this pretty aqua color, and my A's as the bright yellow color. Okay, I think that sometimes helps to do that sort of thing. Okay, and then all we do after and I highly recommend that you rewrite the formula prior to substituting in. Okay, you'll get to the point where you won't have to write the formula and because you memorize it and you just start plugging in the numbers. However, at this point, I recommend if you're not going to use the template that I've provided with you, at least write the formula x equals negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. Okay, all right, so let's substitute in. So now we have negative parentheses 8 plus or minus the square root of parentheses b, which is 8 squared, minus 4 times a, which is 1, c, which is 15, all over 2 times a, which is 1. Okay, from that point we can simplify further. So we would get x equals negative 8, we can leave it like that now, plus or minus the square root of 8 squared is now 64. It's really important, guys, also to stay nice and neat and organized in this. If you're messy and you skip some steps, it's going to be hard to figure out what you've done. Okay, now as I look at this minus 4 times a times c, okay, if there is an odd number of negative symbols, okay, 1, 3, whatever, then we know that this down here will be minus. Okay, if, for instance, if the 15 had been negative, that would be an even number of negative symbols, which it would be at the bottom here, 64 plus. Okay, so we know it's 64 minus something. We know that 4 times 1 is 4, and then times 15. If you don't know that, you could go ahead and multiply it out, but it is 60. Okay, so 64 subtract 60. And then all over, oh, that's interesting, all over 2 times 1, which is 2. Okay, we can simplify that further. I'll use a different color for this next step. So then that becomes negative 8 plus or minus the square root of 64 minus 60. We know that that would be 4 all over 2. Okay, and just go step by step. Don't try to do too many steps in one. Okay, take it slow here at first when you're getting used to this. I'll use green now. Okay, next step would then be negative 8 plus or minus the square root of 4 we know is plus or minus 2. So I'll put my 2 and then that's all over 2. Okay, so here's where a lot of kiddos get real lazy and make some mistakes. So we know that x is equal to negative 8 plus or minus 2 over 2. At this point, what I want to see, or what I would like for you to do, is to split that. Okay, what that is telling us is that, oopsie, here we go, is that x, I'll go to gray, that x is equal to negative 8 plus 2 over 2. So I'll take that one. But that's also saying that x is equal to negative 8 minus 2 over 2. Okay, we have two solutions here because we have a plus or minus. All right, so then we simplify the solution here on the left. And it becomes x equals negative 8 plus 2, we know is negative 6 over 2. Which is negative 3. That's one of my solutions. X is negative 3. Okay. My other solution, I have two solutions here. My other solution is x equals negative 8 minus 2 is negative 10. Okay, so negative 10 over 2. X is equal to negative 5. Okay, so if you like the squigglies here, okay, it would be solutions of negative 5 and negative 3. Make sure you don't put regular parentheses there, or that would indicate that it would be a coordinate pair, and this is not a coordinate pair. Okay, remember our y's are equal to 0 in this case. Okay, so let's play again. Let's do another one. Okay, this time let's say that our quadratic is y equals 3x squared minus 5x plus 20. Again, since these are x-intercepts, our solutions are x-intercepts, we set our y equal to 0. So, whoa, what happened? Let's use my little eraser guy. Okay, I'm back. So let's set it equal to 0. 0 is equal to 3x squared minus 5x plus 20. Okay, let's identify our A, our B, and our C. So my A is equal to 3. My B is equal to, make sure you include the negative, negative 5. And my C is equal to positive 20. Okay, I recommend you write the quadratic formula, or you can use that little template sheet that I've put in your teams. But we know that when the quadratic is set equal to 0, the x, golly gee, hold on. We know, oh gee willers. Gee willers, that's a new one. Okay. We know that x is equal to negative b plus or minus the square root of, parentheses, b squared minus 4 times a times c, and that is all over 2 times a. And let's highlight these guys again. Be easier to see. And then my b's, and then my c's. Okay. So now what I want to do is go in and substitute. Okay. Don't try to do the solving and the simplification during this step. Just substitute. That's it. Okay, there's a lot of math going on here, and if we start doing lots of steps within one step, we make silly mistakes. Okay, so x is equal to negative, parentheses, negative 5 plus or minus the square root of, parentheses, negative 5 squared minus 4 times 3 times 20 all over 2 times 3. Okay. I shouldn't have done this one next. I meant to save this one for last. Gosh darn it. That's okay. This one's going to have a different type of solution for us, but it's good to talk about. Okay. So now I'm going to use blue for my next step. So now I'm going to be simplifying. I'm going to be simplifying this. Okay, so x is equal to negative times a negative 5 is simply 5 plus or minus the square root of negative 5 times negative 5, or negative 5 squared, is 25. And we know the next is going to be minus, because there's just, it's going to be negative 4 times 3, which is negative 12. And then that would be multiplied by 20. So 20 times negative 12. So 12 times 0. Okay, so negative 240. All over 2 times 3, which is 6. Okay. Okay, I'm going to use green for my next step. Just simplifying, okay? All I'm doing right now is just simplifying. And so now my next step is x is equal to 5 plus or minus. Let's do 25 subtract 240. So 240 minus 25, 115, and it's negative, right? All over 6. Now check this out. So we talked about this when we were, I think it was when we did the solving using the square root method, okay? Square root of a negative number. Square root of a negative number, okay? It would be an imaginary number, and that's not something that we talk about in Algebra 1. So just know if you ever get, and we could also talk about the discriminant, but if you get inside the radical symbol, the square root symbol, if you get a negative number, for now in Algebra 1, for the remainder of the year, you're going to consider that as just simply no real solutions. Okay? So the solution to this is that there are no real solutions. And that would be one of the options on the Math Excel or Delta Math or whatever. Okay, so no real solutions if you have a negative in the radical symbol. Okay, all right, I'm sorry, I meant to do that one last, but I failed. All right, so now let's go and try another one. All right, this one will be better. All right, this one, I'm going to trick you a little bit, not really, but I want to talk about this. So I have 3x squared subtract 4x equals 7. Okay, so my C is not equal to 7, because remember, the first thing that I have to do is set this equal to 0, or the quadratic formula does not work, factoring does not work, none of that stuff works. Okay, so I have to set this equal to 0, so I subtract the 7 on both sides. So I get 3x squared minus 4x minus 7 equals 0. Now that is a quadratic that I can work with. So I identify then my A, my B, and my C. So A is equal to 3, B is equal to negative 4, and C, make sure you put in there that negative 7. Okay, let's write the quadratic formula. So I'll write it in red, that's fun. X is equal to negative parentheses B plus or minus the square root of B squared. Oops, messed that up just a little bit. Okay, square root of B squared minus 4 times A times C all over 2 times A. Okay. I'm not going to take the time to highlight this time. You certainly can if you would like to. Now all we're going to do is substitute. Okay, don't do any of the simplification yet, just substitute and that's it. So now we know that x is equal to negative parentheses, negative 4, plus or minus the square root of parentheses, negative 4 squared, minus 4 times 3 times negative 7, all over 2 times 3. Okay, now we can begin our simplification. I'll use blue. Blue for Buckeye. All right, so now I know that x is equal to negative times negative 4 is 4, plus or minus, square root. Negative 4 squared is 16. Okay, now I have an even number of negative symbols. So negative times a negative is going to be a positive, so it's going to be a plus. All right, so then I have 4 times 3 is 12 times 7 is 84. So it's going to be plus 84 all over 6. Okay, let's go down just a little bit. Let's use the green. Okay, next step. Simplification again, that's it. So x is equal to 4 plus or minus the square root of 16 plus 84. You will find that that is 100 all over 6. Okay, well we know what the square root of 100 is, don't we? So now that's telling us that x is equal to 4 plus or minus, what's the square root of 100? 10. 10 all over 6. Okay, so this is fun. Remember, that means two things. Do not leave your answer like that. Okay, that's not good enough. We know that that is two different things. We know that that is x is equal to 4 plus 10 over 6. And we know that that is equal to x equals 4 subtract 10 over 6. Two solutions, figure them out. Okay, don't leave it like that. That would not be good. That would make Mrs. Williams sad. Okay, so we get x is equal to 14 over 6, which simplifies to 8/3, right? Divide top and bottom, just kidding. Divide top and bottom by 2, it would be 7/3. 7/3. And this one would be x is equal to negative 6 over 6, which is negative 1. So x is equal to 7/3 and x is equal to negative 1. Those are the x-intercepts. Those are the solutions. Those are the roots. Those are all meaning the same thing. You could put them in your fancy brackets in either order, 7/3, comma, negative 1. Okay, so those are a few examples for you. Remember, if you get a negative in the radical, it means there are no real solutions. So this is the first of 2 required videos for you this week. I am going to do a third for extra credit. So this one has rational solutions. The next one that I will show you will have irrational solutions. Alrighty, thanks so much.